What's poppin' YouTube? Extra Thick Games back here again, and this time it is with another deck profile. That's right, this is the one that I promised you guys, this is the one that I had been promising. This is the super spicy variant of a rather popular deck around this time, and the one that I did end up competing with yesterday at the local event when Soul Fusion was released. And which deck have I been talking about this whole time? Which deck have I been hyping up for all these weeks that my channel has been a thing? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that deck is Cyber Dragons. That's right, Cyber Dragons. Well, this deck, I had really been playing this deck since the cards came out way back in the GX era. This was just always sort of my favorite playstyle, just special summoning out the original one, and then, oh my god, back in the super casual days when thinking that getting your hands on one of these was like the hardest thing in the world, and even getting the common ones that were reprinted in the starter decks and structure decks was just this unattainable task. But yet here we are. The deck has grown and evolved so much, and with its recent support it is just at its prime right here, right now. Now, in spite of that, I do have to admit that at the local event yesterday, I really did not do as well as I had hoped. It was a small event. There were 4 rounds of Swiss, and I got annihilated in my first and fourth matches. Second and third, I won, and I won soundly. But first and fourth, I went up against Metafist first, and then Altergeist fourth, and I'll admit during Metafist I had no idea how that deck worked and had no idea how to play against it. So here they are banishing all my cards, and I'm activating Desires on top of it, and before I know it, I'm all out of good combo pieces, and then I get blown out of the water. And Altergeist, I really just have absolutely no excuse for. I've played that deck several times. I've beaten that deck several times with other decks, including the Dark Lord deck that I did a deck profile of a few weeks ago. But I was too overconfident about this one and too excited to go in and play that I did not side for that deck at all. And really it came down to cockiness, and while I got my hands on all of the new Cyber Dragon cards, I hadn't really practiced with them enough, and when it came down to playing against real people, I found myself playing old school style, like basically Infinity Turbo, and half the time I would forget that Mega Yeet Dragon was a thing, or the fact that Cyberload Fusion was a quick play that could have saved me a good few times. But the deck and my spicy tech options did help me, and they do work and boost the consistency. I was able to soundly defeat a Layer of Darkness deck as well as a Blue Eyes deck. But this isn't a video about my locals results by any means. We want to get into the deck profile. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. First and foremost, we gotta run the 3 original Cyber Dragons, and I like to run the ones from the, oh god, that had to be what, 2006-10? Just secret rare, original art, Cyber Dragons. Can't beat it. Can't beat it. You gotta have this card for the deck. It's self-explanatory, but this is my favorite, just printing of the card. Regardless, next we have got the new Cyber Dragon Hertz. Playset of it, of course. Now this one, when you can get it to go off, is fantastic, but surprisingly it can be a little difficult to get it to work. Its first effect, the fact that it has to be special summoned, that tripped me up a few times, and I cut all of the Cyber Dragon Dries for it, which I found myself a few times wishing that I hadn't, or maybe at least still had 1 or 2 copies of that, because I don't know, sometimes I had a hard time special summoning this card, but more often than not I would use it for the second effect when it is sent to the graveyard, getting that Cyber Dragon from your deck or your graveyard. That was spectacular. That's just recurring resources and extending your plays. That's easily the best part about this card, other than the Cyber Dragon name. And then Triple Core, of course. It is a searcher that searches out your searchers. That's just simply, it's self-explanatory. You gotta have all three of them, and even if you lose them or if you link them away, and somehow your opponent manages to break your board, you've got a combo starter for your next turn, because you can just banish one of them and get a Cyber Dragon from deck. Arguably the best card in the deck. Another one on that argument list would be the Galaxy Soldier. Another one that it's a level 5 light machine. We all know this, and you can discard a card, and that's generally how I would get Hertz's effect to go off. And then you get another Galaxy card, and then you can just do the same thing and have 2 level 5s on the field automatically, and then that can go into your rank 5 Xyz plays, and then you're off to the races from there. Very good card, very standard in the deck. Gotta have all 3 of these. Now, to start with more, I guess, unconventional choices, I play one Cyber Eltanin. And of course I gotta play the V-Jump promo version of the card. I'm a sucker for those printings, love V-Jump promo ultra rares. But I really don't see this card played very much in Cyber Dragons, and I don't know why, especially with the release of Cyberload Fusion. And another interesting fact, when you summon it, it blows up all face-up monsters on the field, but in one of the best ways. This card doesn't target, this card doesn't destroy, this card sends all face-up monsters on the field to the graveyard. There is just not a whole lot that is immune to that these days. So it's a better Dark Hole that turns itself into a potentially very high attack value body on the field and can further lead into fusion plays, which we'll get into here in a little while. And now here we go with my main deck spicy tech choices. I play triple Deep Space Cruiser 9. Now I can hear you guys now being like, oh, THICC, what is this casual anime bull nonsense that you are playing right here? And, well, let me go ahead and tell you. For those of you who don't know, Deep Space Cruiser 9 was released in Legacy of the Valiant, and it is a level 9 light machine monster. Level 9, light and machine. This card can be searched with Cyber Repair Plant, but as some of my opponents noted before they found out what I actually used the card for, they were like, oh, so you can use this as potentially a slower Galaxy Soldier on top of it. Which I'm like, well, yes, it's good for that. You discard a machine, and you get to special summon this. It's another way to get Hertz into the graveyard to get that search going for you. But you'll see why I like to play the 3 of these guys here in a moment. That level 9 factor comes into play swimmingly. Next, to round up the monsters, we have our hand trap lineup. We have double Ash Blossom. We have double Ghost Ogre. And we have the one effect Veiler. I don't really like to play triples of the hand traps because of the fact that you have to play so many of them. If you run 3, not only are you ruining deck space for combo pieces and play extenders, but if you have one that's more geared to one situation and you just draw into all of them and it doesn't help you against this current deck, well, you've kind of got a whole bunch of bricks in your hand. And then the fact that each of them are like once per turn, I'm pretty sure if you draw into multiples, they're bricks, they're dead. 2 of Ghost Ogre and Ash is a really good number. I just don't see Droll and Lockbird. I mean, Droll and Lockbird is a great card, don't get me wrong. Maybe it's the local metagame that I've been playing against, but it just it just doesn't do much for me. So I cut it from the deck when I was making it. And then Valor, just a monster negate, that came in handy. That came in handy a lot, it really did. You can sub that out for impermanence if you'd like, but I don't know. People weren't really playing Called by the Grave either, so Valor seemed fine. It's up to you. Now, moving on to spells, we start with double Cyber Emergency, as well as double Cyber Rev System, and double Cyber Repair Plant. Now, THICC, why are you playing 2 ofs instead of 3 ofs here? These aren't the hand traps, and these aren't ones per turn. Well, that's true, but deck space was pretty tight in this one, regardless. And if you've already got most of your combo pieces and extenders on the board, or have used them up if they're underneath Xyz monsters as materials, then the ones that search don't really do a whole lot for you. If you've banished most of your cards from things like Desires or some other cards that we'll get to, Rev System doesn't do you much good, and Repair Plant is situational because you have to have monsters, or you have to have a particular monster in the grave to do it, and we do run a lot of it, but to make room for all of them, we really did have to cut the space down to 2 each. Now, don't get me wrong, siding for consistency is definitely a thing that I do, and we'll get to that in the side portion, but I've never found myself wanting for any of these cards in any of my games yesterday. Now, for the fusion cards, we do run the double Overload Fusion, as well as the double Cyberload Fusion. God, Cyberload Fusion. Really good card that I just did not know how to use to its fullest potential yesterday. But on the topic of getting cards banished, Overload Fusion, you're going to want to put some of those cards from your graveyard into the banish zone to get yourself out of Fusion Monster, assuming that you've got maybe Cliffort Genius on the board. And then, if you do that, you can combo really well into using Cyberload Fusion to use the cards that you just banished and put them back into your deck and get another one. Now, it's true that while it is a quick play spell, the monster that you summon with Cyberload Fusion is the only one that can attack once it's summoned. But keyword being there once it's summoned, and that's the good part about that card being a quick play spell. This potential I didn't realize. What you could do is have your Link monster on the field, use your Overload, and say, get a Chimeritic Rampage Dragon. Pop their back row, attack several times. But now you're in the battle phase, so you can quick play that Cyberload Fusion and get your second Rampage Dragon and start using that effect and get more attacks. And by that point, your other monsters have already attacked, so the drawback of Cyberload Fusion doesn't matter to you at this point. I didn't realize this, and that could have saved me a good bit during my match with the Metaphys player. Live and learn. Live and learn. Next up, double limiter removal. The fact that this is at 2 is just spectacular for this deck. The OTK potential is just unreal. You get just 2 Cyber Dragon names on the field and hit the limiter removal, and you're at 8,000 easy if you can use Infinity to slurp up an opponent's monster and maybe use its effect to negate something and destroy it. You get an open board, you just win, and having 2 is just incredible for consistency. Double Desires, not 3. Like, deck space is tight. I like 2s more than 3s for the most part, especially for once per turn type cards like Desires. One game I actually resolved both of them and didn't deck out, but I mean, it helps the consistency, and it's just really good at 2 in the deck. You don't want to run 1, you don't want to run 3. The consistency and the number is perfect. You're not getting rid of too many of your names, and you're getting all of the pluses that you need. I feel like I've rambled on about this card enough. But I got to, alright? I really got to. There's very few decks that I don't run Desires in. It's a great card, and I think in like 90% of decks should play it. But that's my opinion. Next, more doubles. Machine duplication. You now have two targets for this. You've got your core and you've got your Hertz. Speaks for itself. Get a bunch of Cyber Dragons out on the field and just extend your plays exponentially. Now here's another unconventional choice that goes with my tech choice, okay? I run double Inferno Reckless Summon. Okay, yeah, I can hear you, but THICC, you're giving your opponent just unbelievable pluses too. Well, not necessarily, and even if you do, when you do the play that I am, it doesn't necessarily matter more often than not. In this day and age, you're playing mostly extra deck heavy decks, and you want to go second in this. So if your opponent only has extra deck monsters on the field, Inferno Reckless Summon doesn't do anything for them. And you're going to be able to go into all three of your Deep Space Cruiser 9s and go into your play from there for virtually no cost. I do have to admit, though, against the Blue Eyes player, I did accidentally allow him to... He had an alternative dragon on the board, and I played this, and he got to summon the 3 regular Blue Eyes from deck. It still ended up fine, but, wow, I didn't see that coming. And then wrapping up the main deck, we do play the 1 Soul Charge. Soul Charge wins games. It's self-explanatory. You get all those monsters on the board, you get your combo pieces back, you get your extra deck plays... You gotta play Soul Charge. Not having a battle phase and paying those life points even matter. So that wraps it up for the main deck. Let's go ahead and get into that extra deck now. First and foremost, we play the 1 Cyber Dragon Seeker. I don't generally like to play this card in the extra monster zone itself because it only opens up the 1 more, but if you've already summoned your next Link monster and you have this one in one of the arrows that it points to, this can help you incredibly. The attack boost, in combination with several other cards that do attack boosts, like your Limiter Removal or maybe your Cyber Dragon Nova, the OTK potential is just unreal, and this card helps out exponentially. The only other Link monster we run is the Cliffort Genius. 2 extra monster zones opened up. It has some protection for itself, that's alright, and then if you summon a bunch of monsters at the same time, you get a search. That's not gonna... that's not going to happen often, and that's not really why you play this card. Sure, you can do it with your Machine Dupe, you can do it with your Soul Charge, your Inferno Reckless Summon, but really you just want those 2 monster spaces open. You gotta play the Cliffort Genius. And when those situations do happen, it's gonna justify that even more over just some maybe generic Link too, but it's a solid pick. That's always the one that I wanted to go into first. For our Xyz plays, double Infinity. Standard, you're literally never going to go into 3 infinities in one duel, especially since you can only rank up from Nova into it once per turn, so even if you do manage to pull off several Novas, you can only get the 1 infinity that way per turn, and we don't run any level 6s, so it speaks for itself at 2. But it's incredible. That negate and that absorption ability is still really powerful, no matter... God, however many several years ago this card was released. This can still win you games on its own. It really can. Next, we got the double Cyber Dragon Nova. This card has gotten better since its release, I would like to say, not only because of its potential to go into infinity, but ever since Master Rule 4 happened, its ability to detach and special summon 1 just gives you more Link fodder and just more monsters and names on board. Then the attack boost is a thing, and every now and then you'll still get someone who blindly tries to destroy this card with an effect, and then you get to summon just some massive monster that they never saw coming and ruin their whole day. Next one is Constellar Pleiades. He's still a really good card once per turn, and detaching and sending back to hand. Bouncing to hand is still one of the best monster removal options, and people don't really see it coming more often than not. They think it's an old card that is a little outdated, but it still works just fine. A lot of my boards would end on Cliffort Genius, Infinity, Seeger to Pleiades, and that would be GG at that point. It really would, especially if I had a hand trap in hand, but I never once considered cutting this card. It is entirely too valuable for the deck. And now, the reason why I play Deep Space Cruiser 9, as well as Inferno Reckless Summon. The spiciest card of the year, of the format, of all time. In Cyber Dragons, we play number 92 Heart Earth Dragon, and that's right, my friends, this one is Ghost Rare. I'm telling you, this... Y'all can ridicule this choice all you want. This works. You discard something, you discard your Hertz to go into your Cruiser 9, you get your search off of Hertz, and you activate your Inferno Reckless Summon because you special summon something with 1500 or less, and you get the 3 of them. And chances are your opponent only has extra deck monsters and doesn't plus for anything. You overlay all 3 of your cruisers, and you go into Heart Earth Dragon, and this is a Yubel, basically, but with no drawbacks whatsoever. And then, when your opponent really just doesn't know what hit them when you summon this card, their first instinct is going to be just spot removal. Get this thing off the field as soon as possible before it does some just crazy shenanigans. But that leads into the craziest of shenanigans, because we play banish cards, we play desires, we play overload fusion. They destroy this by an effect while it has material. It comes back with 1,000 attack points for each banished card, and that's game. And even if you don't resolve that one, when it stays on the board for a turn, if it goes into your opponent's turn and they haven't blown it up and brought back just some enormous beat stick monster, at the end of their turn, this card will banish anything that they decided to do that turn. I'm telling you, this is consistent, and this card wins games. This did me very, very well last night. If I went into this, that was a good game for me. It really was. Alright, that wraps up the Xyz monster lineup, though. So, we've got our fusions. We don't run any synchros. We could with the hand traps, but we don't. Extra deck space is too tight. Gotta start off with the 1 Mega Yeet Dragon. Self-explanatory. This card breaks extra links. This card gets rid of problematic extra deck zone monsters. And if someone's siding in or teching in a Cyber Dragon monster with this same strategy, you can use their own and just go into this and just gives it more attack power. I have to admit that was done to me last night, but I also did it back, so it's just a good universal card. You gotta have it to break extra links and problematic monsters in the extra monster zone. Then we run the double Chimera Tech Rampage Dragon. Standard, really standard one. It's level 5, so if it's outlived its usefulness as far as effects, you can just go into an Xyz play. But chances are, if you get one of these, never mind both of them on board, you're gonna win, because not only are you destroying their back row, but you've got multiple attacks. Rampage Dragon wins you games, and it's super easy to get out. We still run the 1 Fortress Dragon. It's I could conceivably see cutting this card, because unless it's the mirror match, maybe even just putting it in the side deck in the event of the mirror match, but I don't know, unless you're playing some deck that runs a lot of machines, this card doesn't do a whole lot for you, but it still does enough, especially for the cards that tech in Cyber Dragon monsters. It and Mega Yeet Dragon are good for those situations, and those situations really do come up more than you might think. But that's my only really uncertain choice. We do run 1 Chimera Tech Overdragon to wrap up the Chimera Tech monsters. Now, again, not a card that's played very often. It does have a pretty heavy drawback of blowing up everything on your field when it's summoned, but if you're using something like Overload Fusion or Cyberload Fusion, and you just get that huge stack of attack points for each material that you can use that way, and you can attack monsters that many times, you summon this, you really just won. That's just all there is to it. Wrapping up the fusion monsters, we have the Cyber Eternity Dragon. Good card, new card. And Cyber End Dragon. I really love how Eternity and End, 4028, 28, 4000, they're just opposite cards of each other. Now I can hear you asking, THICC, why are you running Cyber End Dragon? This card is trash. And yeah, Yeah, you're right. There are better options, but let me go ahead and say you never summon this by means of any of the fusion cards. You summon this when your opponent blindly destroys your Nova, and you go into Cyber End Dragon. No, we don't run the Barbaroid. I'll be the first to admit, that's a better card choice. But we run Cyber End Dragon for one reason and one reason only, and that is style points, my friends, and style goes a long way. We're playing Cyber Dragons. We're not playing Vehicroids. And then back to Eternity Dragon. It's just interesting card, and more often than not, your opponent's not going to know everything that this card does. They're going to have, like, if they're not an avid Cyber Dragon player, or if they don't run into many of us, they'll see this card and remember, like, one of the effects that it does. And then, like, forget about the part, what happens when it's blown up when you got a fusion monster in the graveyard, or anything like that. It's a sneaky card. It really is. You gotta have it though. It's versatile. It's good for all sorts of situations. If there's something that blowing up back row and just attacking a bunch of times won't solve, Eternity Dragon, chances are, might do the trick instead. But that does wrap up our extra deck. So without further ado, let's get into one of the biggest reasons as to why I didn't do as well as I would have liked yesterday, and that is the side deck. So the 15-card side deck that I ran yesterday was more for consistency than countering anything that I thought I might run into, which was my biggest mistake right there. I had like one card choice that could conceivably help counter things that I might run into, but I learned from that experience and have since very much redone the side deck. But let's get into this embarrassment. The one Cyber Eltanin in the side deck, because if you just need that massive spot removal, you can dig for it and just get to it quicker, and goes into your Cyberload fusion plays faster. It just blow a mass removal that can combo into other things and have a massive body. You might just need it more than once to be more consistent with things like that. The third Ash Blossom, yeah, I know I talked about how running 3 wasn't necessarily great for situations, especially when it's a once per turn thing, but overall this is still the most useful hand trap. It does so much against the most decks out there, much more than Ghost Ogre or Droll. And I don't run Ghost Bell at all because, like, yes, every deck does interact with your graveyard at some point, but that seems to be the most situational. Like, they don't have to do that at any given point every single turn, and then, like, if they know that you are running that, they can just do something else, because a lot of decks, like, really can. We do run the, that would make double Veiler, if we sided in the other one. We don't need that. That was a poor decision on my part, it really was. And then for the consistency factor, boosting, the side deck does consist of the third Cyber Emergency and Cyber Repair Plant, more Searchers just in case, but that never really came up to the point of where I would need it. But having 3 Cyber Emergencies is just a good idea. Plants, not so much, but, I mean, Searchers, right? I'm the first to admit this was a bad choice on my part, and I'm going to get into later how I correct these choices. Then, for the other triples, Machine Dupe and Pot of Desires. Can't really run 3 in this deck because of how much you do search. You run the risk of decking out if you resolve that too many times. And Machine Dupe, I'm okay with the idea of running 3 of them since you have 6 targets instead of before where you really only had the 3. But you can still really only summon them from the deck, and if you've drawn 1 or 2 of them already, or played them, of the original Cyber Dragons, then this card really just doesn't do much for you, and it's dead at that point. So seeing it before that happens is optimal. The one Called by the Grave, never sided it in. Only 1 because I literally only have 1. Maybe I'll get 2, but I don't know, this deck is more aggressive and I would really like to play it as such, so I doubt I'm going to keep the one Called by the Grave in. Now, one that I wish I would have sided in more often would have been the Shared Ride. Play 2 of that. Max C, but instead of for special summoning, it's for searching, and every deck searches. This would have been phenomenal for me to have played against Altergeist, but you live and learn, right? Then I sided in 2 Power Bonds. There's just no excuse to play Power Bond at this point anymore. It's bricky, it's cloggy. The style point, sure, but going in, wasting resources on your turn to go into an 8,000 attack point Cyber End Dragon or a 4,200 attack point Chimera Tech Rampage Dragon just doesn't do the trick. So in the updated side deck, we just aren't going to play Power Bond at all. And then to round up the side deck, the one good choice I made was having 3 red Reboot, which did buy me some time in my Altergeist matchup, but I needed to side more against it, and I just did not bring those cards and didn't think it was going to be necessary. I was overconfident and didn't know my deck as well as I thought, and I paid the price for it. So now that we got that disaster of a side deck out of the way, let's get into how we should actually play a side deck in this version. Alright, my thick boys, I'm going to show you how I should have sided against all of these decks at the event yesterday, and how I will continue to side for any event that I attend in the near future, unless, of course, just something phenomenal happens and something takes the meta by storm. I need to learn how to side against it instead, but this is just something that will make my deck more versatile against just about anything. We're still going to run the Elton, we're still going to run the 3rd Ash Blossom, but I don't know why I don't just side this in every single deck I play, but the triple Chaos Hunter. This would have just single-handedly won my deck against the Metaphys player every single time, shuts them down completely, and it's not just Metaphys, because, I mean, you're not going to run into that very often. I sure haven't, but a lot of decks do plus and do get to extend their plays off of banishing cards, and this has a fairly sizable thick body as well as the ability to just shut that mechanic down altogether for your opponent. Really great card, and I think I'm just going to side it in everything. Still going to side in the 3rd copy of Emergency Implant, still going with the 2 Shared Rides, and still going with the 3 red Reboots, but now we are also going to side in another playset of traps, and that's going to be Royal Decree. This is my answer to Altergeist. This is, as far as Cyber Dragons are concerned, I know this is still a reactive card to play, but that's why we're siding against it. Not playing it every single time, but it's just a 1 card that really probably has the best potential to do it. Just shuts down trap cards. Oh, man. I don't really side anything against Goki or Sky Striker or even Thunder Dragons or Dangers at this point, because I feel like my deck really already does well against them on its own, and it doesn't need the extra just counter to those decks. This is what I feel like is going to be the most useful way to side deck for my Cyber Dragons in the coming format. Now, what cards to side out? Chances are anybody watching this video who wants to play a build similar to this would probably, the first thing that they'd side out would be the Inferno Reckless Summons and the Deep Space Cruiser 9s, as well as Hard Earth Dragon. And I understand that. I really understand that. You really gotta commit to playing it that way. When you open and you have the ability to go into that, you've got to commit to it, and that is a big risk to take. It is generally high payoff for me, but if you don't want to take that risk, I totally understand, and that's what 5 main deck zones, and find 5 main deck slots and 1 extra deck slot that you can side out for. Which, I mean, if you wanted to side out or have an extra deck monster in your side deck, one to consider would be Boral Sword Dragon. You can put monsters on the board easily enough in this deck. I don't do it this way because if I'm going to have 4 monsters on the field, I'd rather have several bodies, especially one that includes a negate or one that can bounce back to hand, rather than one that attacks a bunch, because I really already have that in the Rampage Dragon, and I feel like it just... it does more. To have Borrelsword Dragon in the deck would be a redundant waste of resources, in my opinion. I still... one day, Borrelsword, one day, I'll find a deck that I like to play, that I can play you in, and just go into every game. One day. It'll happen. And then, on another note, 2 cards that I wanted to add into my main deck but hadn't arrived to me yesterday. They literally arrived to me today, which was a little disheartening, but you know, what can you do? Online shopping. I wanted to add the 2 evenly matched to my deck. It's a going second deck anyway. This is just another way to interrupt your opponent and just take down their huge first turn boards. It's a phenomenal card that synergizes really well in this deck. And the 2 cards that I took out to make room for these, because we want to play 40 cards in this deck. I did try to make a 50 and even a 60 card variant of it, but the deck tried to do too many things, and it got too inconsistent. 40 was the way to go, but back on topic, I would sub out 1 Inferno Reckless Summon as well as 1 Ghost Ogre. I feel like running 1 Ghost Ogre is fine, because when you have it in your hand, especially, God forbid you draw both of them, I feel like you're just waiting to use it on something just for the sake of using it on something, if that makes sense. Ash Blossom is the superior card in my opinion, and Evenly Matched is a superior card to Ghost Ogre if you ask me, and that's why I feel like it is more than justifiable to cut 1 to make room for this phenomenal card. But that is going to wrap it up for my second deck profile on this channel, my super spicy Cyber Dragons. Yeah, it didn't have the best first event results, but the support with it just came out, and I don't play on Dueling Book or Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro or anything, so I haven't had the most practice with it, except in just personal playtesting. But that event really helped out a lot. And I'm going to continue to use this deck in events, and I think I'm going to start doing a whole lot better starting the next time I go. And I will certainly share results and updates with you on that. But lastly, while we were on the topic of yesterday, I just really wanted to talk about something, and that was how much fun I had opening that first box of Soul Fusion. It was a thrill. I had never experienced anything like it, and everyone at the shop seemed to like it, and it was just an overall wonderful experience, and I pulled a lot of value cards. But a lot of value cards at that honestly I'm not going to use. Wasn't ever going to use. They're good for collector's value, but at that point, because I wanted to experience that again, what I did was I sold those cards back to the shop. I sold the Thunderbird, and well, I traded the Snake to the guy I mentioned, and he gave me a Nessie instead. That was a pretty even trade. So I traded the Thunderbird, the Nessie, the Thunder Dragon Fusion, and that one main deck ultra rare monster whose name eludes me at the moment. And when I did that, I managed to have enough store credit to get another box. So that's right, THICC boys, we're gonna have another opening on this channel. Stay tuned and on the lookout for that. Stay